Hi there. We are looking at Mark chapter 14 from the beginning. Now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them any time you want. But you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Now this is a very interesting passage. It's one that we know pretty well. One of the interesting things that comes out of it for me is this line, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. And often when I read that line, I hear myself saying it. I'm like, whoa, that is me. That's what I would have done. Why waste perfume? Why spend so much on this thing? And so being able to realize in that at this time, for this moment, there was a reason for that to be done. I like to kind of point back to this passage sometimes to talk about the lavishness of God. But even the other day, I had someone do that to me. They were talking about prosperity doctrine and rich churches and all this, and they used this passage. Even this woman spent a year's supply of money on this perfume. And my response to them was that this is a very specific passage and a very specific action. And so Jesus, when he turns to them, he says, "This woman has anointed my feet for burial." And so it feels like an exception more than a teaching of let's all go waste lots of money on perfume, or let's spend lavishly on the church because look at this example where lavish spending was done. This was a particular time and a place where Jesus was being anointed because he was about to die. And so that is not the kind of situation that is going to be replicated in our churches pretty often, I don't think. And so I'm not sure, not that I'm saying that there's not space for blessing, because I think if we read the Old Testament, there's a lot of wrestling to be done with the idea of blessing. And I think too often my mindset is kind of a poverty mindset. We have to live with nothing. Everything has to be uncomfortable and horrible. And I'm not sure that that's true either. And I'm wrestling with that. And I'm trying to figure it out with God. But at the same time, we've got to really use the texts. We've got to use the passage as well. And even if that's true, you can't take it from this passage, because this passage was a specific act that was done for Jesus. It's very interesting to see that this is followed by Judas betraying Jesus. And if you read another passage in one of the other Gospels, I think it talks about how Judas had his hand in the money. He was the guy that handled the money for the disciples, and he was using some of it for his own kind of greedy use. And now this moment happens where money is used for someone else, and there's somebody saying, "Oh, this could have been spent on the poor." And the idea is that probably was Judas, and I think he's the one that does it in one of the other retellings of the story. And by the poor, he meant himself. That money could have been put in the bag of money to be used for the poor, which I'm dipping my hand into. And I think this story also speaks of priority. So there's this event happening, and in the midst of it, this woman does the thing that is the beautiful thing. I'm reminded of the story of Mary and Martha, where Martha's doing all the work getting the meal ready, and Mary's sitting at Jesus' feet. And Jesus says, no, she's doing the right thing. She's done what was the good thing to do, sitting at my feet, listening, taking the opportunity to be with me. And so I think we need to be constantly on the lookout for what is the priority in our lives. This might not be directly related, but I think it's an amazing thought to throw in here, that one of the things we learned when we were in Philadelphia was the idea of space given for interruption. And if you look at Jesus' life, when he's heading off to Jairus' daughter, and the woman who's been struggling all those years with the bleeding problem, she touches his cloak, and Because Jesus doesn't carry on with the urgent thing in front of him, Jairus' daughter dies. And it doesn't really matter because later he goes on and raises her from the dead. But he stops the urgency of the matter in front of him and he creates space for the interruption. And that is what is being done here. There's a dinner, there's a party. This woman comes in and she interrupts proceedings. But because Jesus knows the importance of what she's doing, she's preparing me for burial. Here is a symbol and a sign of what is going to happen, that when people look back on it, they'll understand. They don't understand in the moment, but they'll look back on it and they'll understand it later. This is a significant thing. How many times in your day is there an interruption that might be a significant thing? Maybe it is a homeless person asking you for food. And instead of throwing money at them, maybe it's a case of slowing down and going to the store and buying them a meal, finding out their name, asking them their story, and sitting with them and eating food together. Maybe those are the kind of interruptions that Jesus wants us to create space for, because the kingdom of God seems to interrupt the kingdom of man, or the kingdom run by the enemy. And that is what being the church is about, creating spaces, places, times for when the kingdom of God interrupts. Are you prepared for the interruptions in your day? Do you push them aside because you've got urgent things ahead of you? Or like Jesus, are you able to notice this is a significant thing? This is a moment. Let's stop. Let's focus on this and let's do it right. That's a prayer to be prayed. God, help me to be aware of what interruptions in my day are maybe caused by you, or are possibly opportunities to be used by you for the growing of your kingdom.